I'm going to pass it off to Josh to take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Destin. As Destin said, my name is Josh. I live in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. So it's warm here still, and it will continue to be warm for at least another, well, usually the first cold night of the year for us is usually Halloween night. Like we have to kind of figure out what our kids can wear where they won't overheat, which is funny because all my friends in the Midwest and Canada, they have to figure out what Halloween costumes to wear that you can stay warm in. So anyways, I am a chiropractor. So I've been a chiropractor for 17 years. And over the last couple of years, I've been getting very interested in patient communication. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm very excited that all of you have joined us for this. I commend you. Patient communication is something where I think it's a lifetime pursuit. What I want to share today are just three major points that I think can really make big changes and encourage you maybe to continue that pursuit of improving your patient communication. I think we can all agree that going to a provider of any type, whether it's a chiropractor, a massage therapist, mental health provider, there's really three things we want them to do. We want them to accurately diagnose us, right? We want them to provide the best treatments possible. And number three is communicate with us. What are they going to do? What are we responsible to do? What's life like going to be for the next 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years based on the condition that we have? We want clean communication and billing issues and how we operate. And so I think if we just really simplify it into those three kind of principles, diagnosis, treatment, and communication, we can see how important this is. So with that, I'm going to share some slides. And let me know, can I just get confirmation that we're seeing my slides? Let's see. You can throw it in the chat. Perfect. Thank you so much. Now, this presentation is called Empathy is Not Enough. Empathy is great. Empathy is fantastic, and empathy all makes us feel good. But I want to kind of challenge us today to get away from just basing patient communication on empathy. In the research, the word empathy comes up a lot, but here's why I think maybe that's not the best focus. Is empathy relies on us as providers, and I might say therapists, I might say doctors, I might say providers, so forgive me, but it relies on us being in a great mood. There are people out there that are very empathetic, but on days that they're tired, they're worn down, they got bad news about a sick relative or their kids at home sick or whatever, we may need to get away from empathy as the only driving factor of great patient communication, and instead look at how can we build systems and processes that build trust with our patients. And then if we can add empathy onto that, we're in a great place. So you might hear me talk a lot about trust. And I think trust it's separate, but how would I describe it? Empathy and trust are the most important parts of patient communication. And I think we can all think of somebody who we trust a lot, but that maybe we would not describe as empathetic. For example, I had a football coach, Coach Haggerty. I would trust him with my life. If I found out that Coach Haggerty today had access to my bank account, I would never lose a wink of sleep because I could trust that man. But at no point did I ever describe him as warm or empathetic or any soft, cuddly description. He was a hard-nosed football coach, but I could trust him. And on the flip side, remember that if somebody's very empathetic but not trustworthy, that's how con men kind of operate, right? So we want to make sure that we're empathetic to our patients, but also that we're actively building trust. Like we're following through on things we promise, and we're improving their life in ways that we promised we would. So, excuse me. I hope that we can all come to that kind of agreement in how we're going to operate. So like we said, my name is Josh. I'm a recovering poor communicator. I've been an instructor for different various aspects of chiropractic, and I want to help you today to build trust through patient communication. Here's me with my, at the time, I think he was 5-year-old son down in Puerto Vallarta, was on the beach, and he's a hoot like that. And so I just love showing that picture of him. But let me just tell you the backstory of why I got interested in patient communication so much. This is a picture of my good friend Ryan, and Ryan was a great friend and a great mentor to me. And one day he just develops low back pain. Now, he didn't live in my town, but he later told me developed low back pain. So he went to his local chiropractor, and they diagnosed him with mechanical low back pain and treated him for it. Unfortunately, after about 4 or 6 weeks, it wasn't getting any better. So he went to his primary care provider, who gave him some heavy duty Advil. And then Ryan decided to go see a physical therapist, and it didn't really work. And so he went back and found a new chiropractor, and it really didn't work. And then he went to another doctor. And in the end, he went to see 7 different providers, including orthopedic surgeons, massage therapists, PTs, chiros, everybody. And the problem was, none of it was really making him better. But he also had some other findings that he was nervous to share with them. For example, he noticed that he attributed it to the ibuprofen, but he started having red blood in his stool. He also noticed that he had pain at night and it wouldn't ever go away, even when he laid down. And without trying, he lost 23 pounds in 8 weeks. Now, when he went to the doctors, they would say, is there, any red flags or anything like that? And he would say, no, I don't have any. They're all explained away. But anybody looking at this can see that he had what we would typically say in low back pain. He had significant red flags. Pain at night, that's indicative of cancer. Weight loss without trying, indicative of cancer. Red blood in his stool, indicative of cancer. And the truth was, he did have cancer. He had colon cancer, and that's what was producing his pain. By the time the 7th doctor discovered that, unfortunately, Ryan only had about 6 months to live. It was grade 4 or stage 4 colon cancer. And it was a huge loss to me. It was a huge loss, and it drove me nuts. Because why would this smart person who wants relief deny red flags to multiple providers? And as I was thinking about it, I realized we all as providers have a huge hurdle we have to get over. We are forced to ask high trust questions in a very low trust environment. So let me say it again. We ask high trust questions in a low trust setting. So, question for you. I want this to be interactive. I want us to communicate as best as we can. And I'm on one side of the screen and you're on the other in various parts of the world, but let's do this. We as providers, when do we ask our red flag questions? When do we ask them? Throw it in the chat. Throw it in the chat. I'd love to see when you ask your red flag questions. And it doesn't have to be, I deal in back pain because I'm a chiropractor. If you're mental health or you're massage therapy, acupuncture, doesn't matter. But I'm sure you asked some version of red flag questions. Yeah. All right. So I'm seeing beginning of session, before beginning treatment. Great. Initial conversation, first day. That's right. Kyla said, I love this answer. At the beginning, before we've built the trust. All right. Pre-treatment, first assessment. That's right. So we ask these questions in the first 5 minutes of our very first meeting with this person. Now take it out of medicine and or out of healthcare and look at something else. In the first 5 minutes of your first date with somebody, would you ever ask, so let me ask you, are you addicted to any illicit drugs? And also, how many times have you declared bankruptcy? I just want to know for my records here, right? Those questions, although they might be important, feel out of place there because they are high trust questions, but we realize we're in that low trust setting. So as I looked at this issue, I realized we have to ask things. We have to ask them at that initial visit, but maybe we can tweak some things so that we build up trust before that patient ever enters our office, so that when we ask these questions, there's a little bit more trust built up, right? And that comes down to, how does our front desk staff treat them? Another way you can really build trust is by asking the right questions. And great news, the online booking that we have with Jane, that allows us to ask those questions in an electronic format, right? But that actually, the research says that does build trust. So that's a huge advantage, and one reason you should always do online booking. You don't want that person to come into your office and start filling out a clipboard. That actually has less trust building. So we have to do this. So what can we do to support that? Well, that's what today's webinar is all about. So the 3 points I want to cover today are: number 1, listening to your patients; number 2, setting up your Jane to maximize this kind of trust building; and then 3, this idea of preemptive communication. All right. So I love this quote, came out of the research, and it is this: the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place. Just remember, sometimes we think we communicated and really it didn't happen. Maybe the other person was distracted. Maybe we didn't give them the best body language or nonverbal signs and they didn't really capture that message. It's tough. And so ask yourself repeatedly, did communication actually take place? All right. So for those of you who are research driven, I want you to know that this talk is based on a lot of research. And I could provide these lists or actually these slides to the Jane team if you want to look at some of this research yourself. There's so much research around communication. We could go on for days. But basically, when I took all that communication research, I had a team that worked with me, some other great researchers, and we condensed it down to 5 big themes that were present in the research. So you want to take away one thing from today, it would be this: the 5 things that are most important when we communicate with patients. We call it the PATCH framework, named after Patch Adams, who might have been the best communicator in all of medicine, but here it is. The P is patient goals. We need to make sure we at least focus on and discuss the patient's goals, not just ours. If somebody comes in for knee pain, we might have a goal of increasing their dorsiflexion 25 degrees, right? But if we ask our patient, what's your goal? I want to play more pickleball. Cool. Let's talk pickleball, not dorsiflexion, right? A is autonomy. Autonomy is so important. What is our patient willing to do? What is our patient encouraged to do? And we want to empower them to do that, but we need their permission to ask them to do that. And that's autonomy. T is tailoring. Personalize the way you take in information and the way you deliver it. So if our patient communicates with us through email, communicate through email. If they call your office, especially early on in that relationship, it's probably important that you call them back because they interpret calling as a personalized way of communicating. Okay. C, don't forget about communication basics. Things like introducing yourself and using the patient's name in conversation. It's huge. And outside of medicine, it's like a normal thing. But within doctors' offices, less than 10% of medical providers use the patient's name and introduce themselves within visits, less than 10%. So if you just do that one thing, you're in the top 10% of all healthcare providers. All right. And then H is express humility. You know, when somebody comes into your office, they're relying on you to know the answers. And therefore, that makes you the smartest person in the room. But step back and be humble. And remember, we don't need to rub that in their face, right? Don't need to be condescending. And if somebody, I just can't imagine that you love everything about Jane and you're that type of person. Like those two things just don't go together. But I think we can all make sure we express our humility there. So the PATCH framework: patient goals, autonomy, tailoring communication basics, and humility. There's one thing, please think about these 5 things as you are making your patient communications. So when we look at these studies, one of them that jumps out is this study that talked about the spontaneous talking time at the start of a consultation in an outpatient clinic. And so what this research looked at is, if we just ask a patient, hey, how can I help you? And we ask an open-ended question and we just let them talk as long as they want to. And all we do as providers is just reassure them, say things like, that sounds tough. Keep going, right? How long do you think they would talk for? So again, we're asking them, how can I help you? And then we're just letting them talk. And so throw it up in the chat. How long do you think they would talk for if we just let them do that? So the reason this is so important is it's important for people to feel heard, right? They want to make sure that they're heard. And so if we do this, one of the ways, if we cut them off, they don't feel heard, right? But this is one way to build that trust early on. If we start our visit with them talking, then we can quickly build that trust. And I'm seeing 20 minutes, 5 minutes, 17 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 to 5, 5 to 10. Cool. What this research found is that if we just ask our patient, how can we help? And we let them talk as long as possible, they're going to peter out around 93 seconds. 93 seconds. They start running out of steam. And it's crazy. And yes, it depends on the patient and depends on a lot of factors, but on average, 93 seconds. So if we just let them talk for 2 minutes, they're going to feel like this doctor actually listened to me, right? Excuse me. This provider finally listened to me. I finally found someone who listened to what was actually going on. And all it takes from us is just investing 2 minutes, just 2 minutes. But, and of course, listening to your patients is so important because that sets the tone for our trust, right? If we listen to them, their trust goes up in us. And so when we ask those tough red flag questions, they're more likely to give us accurate answers. But here was a second study. Another group said, well, that's interesting that that the patient would go on for 2 minutes. I wonder why they don't. Is it possibly that doctors interrupt patients, right? And so here's a second question for you. What was the average in this study? What was the average amount of time that it took for a doctor to interrupt their patient? So throw up your guess in the chat. And how long do you think it took that doctor to interrupt the patient? 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And all of you who are jumping into the chat, thank you so much. It makes it so much better that we interact and everything. 25 seconds, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, these are all great. It's funny. Nobody has put up anything over a minute yet because I think we all are humble enough to realize we have work to do, right? And what they found in this study was 11 seconds. 11 seconds. That's all it took for the doctor to interrupt. So if I could I get somebody from the Jane team to hop on? Let's see. Maybe Destin, if you wouldn't mind, since you were on earlier, if you can unmute yourself. I just want to show everybody what we're talking about here. So Destin, let's just imagine that you have low back pain, okay? And me as a doctor, I'm going to say, so Destin, I understand you have some pain. Tell me about it, okay? So if you could just do some role play with me and just start making up some symptoms and everything as I ask that question. Does that work for you, Destin?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Destin. So thanks for coming in. How can I help?
So I've been experiencing some lower back pain recently, and I'm not really sure what's triggered it.
Now,
I
is it
have
sharp or shooting, or is it achy? How would you describe it?
maybe more achy, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I interrupted her at the 10-second mark. Now, the intent was to clarify some answers, right? But Destin, as soon as I do that, you have now stopped your flow of discussion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you feel that? Did it feel weird? Like it? Did you notice
Yeah,
that
because I
you?
was going to try and tell you a bit more of my story about
Right,
how I hurt my back. Yeah.
right. And so would Destin leave this little mock visit feeling quote unquote heard? Did her doctor, me, listen to her? Even though we're trying to do our job, and thank you, Destin, you can mute again if you want, but even though we're trying to do our job and get more accurate information, the research says in those first few minutes of that exam, that patient feels like, well, so you didn't listen to me. I never got to tell you about it, right? And the doctor's sitting there like, well, I can't let you tell me about it because we don't have time for that. You have time for that. Be humble and let that person talk. That helps them buy into the style of person you are, and it helps them feel like they're heard. If we can invest that 2 minutes to just let them tell us everything about it, even if it's spilled into 3 minutes, I think everyone has that time. Everyone has that time. Okay. So let's move on. If you want to encourage that long talking where people feel like they were heard, here's some great phrasing for you. Tell me the story of what's going on, right? Not just tell me about your back pain, Destin. It's tell me the story of what's going on. And you want to keep it as open as possible, because what oftentimes will happen is that patient will reveal some facts that actually they don't think are a big priority, but we know are, right? So if it was my friend, if he could reveal that he had pain at night, that may have changed the diagnostic process. So instead of saying, Destin, tell me about your back pain, I want to zoom out and say, Destin, tell me the story of what's going on. Okay. Another great phrasing would be, now, if you weren't dealing with this, what would you love to be doing? Now, why am I asking this question? I want to know their goals, not mine. If Destin wants to get back to playing pickleball, I don't think saying, Destin, we're going to take you from 14 degrees to 28 degrees of dorsiflexion. How's that sound? She might be like, well, I've never heard that word before, and I don't know, but does that help me play more pickleball or not? So if we ask, what would you love to be doing? We'll find out what our patient is measuring for success. I want to hike more. I want to play sports more. I want to care for my kids. Older patients all the time. I'm motivated because I want to take my kids to Disney World. I can remember a patient that said that, right? And this phrasing is so powerful. And then finally asking them, why does that matter so much to you? Right? So if I tell you, look, I got weight to lose. I'll fully admit it on this webinar. I've got some weight to lose quite a bit. And if I tell you, hey, I just started running 6 miles a day and my knees hurt, you might be like, well, yeah, you need to lose weight. But if instead I tell you, listen, if I wasn't dealing with knee pain, I would love to be running. And you say, why does that matter so much to you? And I say, because my daughter's getting married in 9 months, and I want to look good walking down the aisle. Now you have an abundance of information about what motivates me, why I'm on such a maniac about this timeline, and you can learn all this information. So asking those 3 questions on that early part not only gets the patient to feel heard, but we also start dealing in their goals. And you'll find out you can promote autonomy with them, okay? So this 2-minute drill, I'm going to actually skip over it because we kind of did it already, and I'm a little long-winded today. But I would encourage you, set up a 2-minute timer in your office and ask somebody, the next patient that comes in, how can I help you? And just encourage them to keep talking. And you will realize that around a minute and a half to 2 minutes, they peter out. And the first week I did this, I got a lot of people like looking around and saying that's it. Like that's all I have. And they feel that way after just 90 seconds. But those same patients will say, doctor, so I just love the fact that you listen to me. I'm like, I'll listen to anybody for 93 seconds. That's the deal. 5 minutes? I don't know about that. But anyways, I'd encourage you to try that 2-minute drill, okay? And try it with your team as well. So what's the issue we face? There's this huge disconnect in all avenues of healthcare between what the patient wants and what we want, right? Part of that is there's a difference in the roles with a clinical encounter. We have these goals as doctors. We need to know the diagnosis. We know specifically how to treat that diagnosis, but the patient doesn't know how to relate that to what they're complaining of. And so sometimes they feel like there's a giant disconnect. It doesn't have to be a fight, but if you remember these 5 things, always discuss patient goals, autonomy, tailor the communication, remember your communication basics, and the humility, you will find more success. All right. So spend that time. That was point number 1. Now, if we want to get to point number 2, we have to make sure that people feel like they're heard. And it's more, patients want to make sure that we know what they feel, not just how they feel. So Destin might want me to know that her back pain, it's not that she has pain, it's that she's scared because her work requires her to use her back, and she might not be able to continue that work and feed her family, right? Or they're scared that this pain they feel going down their leg means they'll have to have surgery, and they have a $20,000 deductible and blah, 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 right? That's a very American thing, by the way. You Canadians obviously don't have those deductibles. But what they feel, what they're scared of, what they're fearing is so important. And that is more important in that first visit than how they feel or what the condition they have is. So I want to make sure that we understand this. And oftentimes these patients are also scared that sharing that information will be distracting or burdening to the physician. And so they don't talk about them. But has anybody had this? I'm going to pop out of my slides real quick. Has anybody, you can throw this up in the chat, ever had this experience with a patient? They come in after the 4th, 5th, 6th visit, and they say something to the effect of, Doc, I didn't want to tell you this the first time, but I've been dealing with X, Y, Z, right? Or I was scared to tell you this the first time, but I really want to blah, 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 blah. Has anybody ever had that experience with a patient? What is happening there, I think, is they're finally at the point where they trust you and they know that whatever news they're going to give you is not a burden. It's not going to slow down the relationship, and they can, in fact, tell you these things. So I think that that's a powerful moment because it tells us what is most important, right? That how they feel thing. All right, so I'm going to share this little video. I want you guys to watch this video because I feel like this perfectly explains what our patients are going through when they want to be heard, right? So here we go.
It's just there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
All right. Well, what do you guys think? Have you seen this in patients before? Have you had this experience with them about, you know, them? Oh, let's see.
It's just...
you want to focus on the thing you know will help them feel better, and instead they are like, don't, you know, they're not listening, or they want their feelings to be addressed. Throw it up in the chat if you've had this. I think that video perfectly captures that relationship with our patients, right? Like this idea of we know the core issue that all these things you're talking about come from, and they just want to know that they were heard and that these things affected them. Let me see. I'm having difficulty here getting out of my slides here. So, there we go. Okay. And we're back. Okay. So, let's see. I want to see what some of the answers are. Yes, yes, yes. They want to talk through it, process it. Great. Now, what's interesting, I love the fact that the Jane community is all these different providers, right? And because I think it's so huge, I'm a chiro, so I'm not trained in the same ways that like our mental health and our counselor friends are, and they have a lot of solutions. But the reason I want to do webinars like this is you might see somebody in the chat that has an insight because of their background and training. And I think that's one thing that makes the Jane community so strong, especially the Facebook group, is there's a lot of different backgrounds coming into one place to talk about how to improve healthcare. So I love that. So how can we help that person feel heard? An easy way to do this is by sending a follow-up message after that initial visit by saying something to the effect of, this has nothing to do with diagnosis or treatment, but just, I was just thinking about you and wanted to check in. By the way, and then insert a personal anecdote from the very first initial visit that tells them there's no way this could be a robot. This couldn't be automated, right? So something like, hey, Jim, I was just thinking of you and wanted to check in. By the way, give Scrappy a scratch for me. I have a patient named Jim, and he always talks about his dog Scrappy or Scraps, right? If I talk about Scrappy, he knows, wow, I was heard. There's no way that could be robotic or automated, right? Or Kim, it was a pleasure to meet you today. I look forward to getting you back to pickleball quickly. And I hope lunch with your sister was great. This was a patient that mentioned that after this visit, she was going to go have lunch with her sister, who she hadn't seen in 5 years. So including that information makes it impossible for that to be an automated message, right? So that's an easy way, for a person to feel heard, right? So how can you do this powerfully? And I'm going to speed up a little bit because, again, I'm long-winded. But remember that doctor-patient communication is multifactorial, the way we are in that visit, and the way that our paperwork comes across and the message we send, and all of those things all contribute to that doctor-patient communication. But the good news is that no matter where you're at, the research says training providers can help. Great communicators in healthcare are made, not born. As good as you are today, you can always get better. How can you get better today? This week, by this weekend, here's something I would challenge you to do. I'm going to get through the research quickly. All right. Number one, go into your Jane account. I think this is so important. And maybe you've done this already, but this is so powerful. First, click on settings at the top, right? And then go to this tab on the left that says language. I think it should say, that should be a big button that says, I love my patients. Click here, right? Okay. If you go into that, you're going to see a bunch of language. How do you want to do your prefixes, your honorifics? How do you refer to your services? I talk about treatments. Maybe you have sessions, right? It's okay. We all use different language. But if you don't set this, there might be a disconnect where your language doesn't match what your office is actually like. And it starts chipping away at that trust with our patients, right? So one of them is you can customize your language if you just scroll down, right? And I think that's so powerful to customize it and make it sound like you. So in the chat, tell me, are you more formal? Do you like to say, to refer to yourself, for example, if you have a title of doctor, would you go by Dr. Johnson or Dr. Josh? I go by Dr. Josh. I'm pretty informal, as you probably can tell, right? But in your office, are you formal or informal? And do you use patient's first name or Mr. and Mrs., right? Would you say your office is more formalized or less formal? No matter what you put in the chat, I think it's important to make sure the language within your Jane account, as you're sending out communication to your patients, matches what you're like. Informal, less formal, cool. Less formalized, patient first name. I work mostly with kids, cool. Less formal, yeah, very cool. Remember, Jane doesn't know that, so they can't make it seem perfect to your office, but they give you the opportunity to modify as needed. Okay, if you're less formal, that's totally cool. But make sure that your language in your online booking and everything is in there and it sounds like you and it sounds like your office. Yeah. All right. So patch framework, you've seen this. Finally, let's get to the last thing. The last point I want to do is preemptive communication. And Bianca and Destin, are we okay on time if I go like 3 more minutes?
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Fantastic. All right. By the way, that was promoting autonomy because I asked for permission. So see how all these things work in there? Yeah. Anyways. All right. So preemptive communication. This is a huge way we can build trust. And it's a way we can build trust before that first visit where we really need to get into those hard to ask questions in that low trust environment. So here's the point is to communicate with your patient before there's a problem. Okay. Oops. So if you think about if you were a personal trainer and somebody never worked out before in their life and they have their first workout, right? Let's answer this in the chat. What do you think is going to happen in the next 24 to 48 hours? So this person has never worked out in their life and you take them through one heck of a weight training workout, right? What is probably going to happen in the next 24 to 48 hours that they might not be ready for? Muscle soreness. Good. DOMS, soreness. Yes. We all know this, right? Why? Because we all have the knowledge that, hey, if you work out for the first time, you're going to have probably some soreness. So if I send out a message before that occurs and I say, hey, Mr. Johnson, it was a pleasure working with you today. I just want to let you know it's likely that you're going to be sore. Here's some strategies to get rid of soreness, right? We're preemptively communicating with him so he can be ready for that when it occurs. So in your office, what are some ways that you may preemptively communicate? Well, here's one for you. If you have the ability to send a picture and a message, I got this because my in-laws recently went to a visit and they're having dinner with us on Sunday. And they said, we're like, hey, drive safe home. And they said, well, we're going to go drive by that doctor's office tonight to just get an idea where it is. So it was a Sunday and they had a Monday morning appointment. They wanted to pre-drive the area because they don't like walking far distances, right? And so the office they went to was in this building. And the problem is when you pull in, you see this right side of the building or what's on the right side of your screen. But really the entrance is over here where the brown paint is, right? And that's where the elevator is. If you go into the front building here, there's only a stairway and my mother-in-law doesn't move too well and the office is on the 2nd floor. So sending a simple picture saying, hey, go into this entrance, the east entrance with the brown paint, and then take the elevator 2nd floor, preemptively helps our patients feel or build trust, right? We know it's going to be a struggle. So before they ever experience it, I want them to get this. What are some other things that come up in your office that you could preemptively communicate that would build that trust? For example, is there a parking issue? If you're in a downtown area, a very urban area, parking is huge, right? We certainly don't want our patients to get towed. Parking, great. Anything else? Any other things that you think would preemptively communicate with people? How about this? Yeah, if somebody has a wheelchair, great. How about what should they wear to your first visit? I'm a chiropractor. I do a lot of work with golfers. If we're doing a golf analysis, we're going to use 3D markers. They should dress like they're going to the gym. A lot of my golfers, they'll work as attorneys and accountants, so they'll come in like a 3-piece suit and a tie. I'm like, oh, come on, right? But make sure if you're sending out these messages to your patients, preemptively communicate the important points, right? Cool. How to optimize Zoom. Oh, I didn't even think about this one. How to optimize Zoom for a speech language pathology session. That's awesome. Fasting before ketamine therapy. Fantastic. Running shoes of a running injury. Eat before acupuncture. These are all great ideas. You can put these into the preemptive community or the patient communication within Jane to make sure that people understand that. Session start and end time. All right. I think an important one is if you're running an office that doesn't, and I see this more and more, doesn't have any front desk staff, letting them know, hey, there's no one at the front desk, but I will be with you at your appointment time, or I will come out at your appointment time. I think that is so important. Yeah. So preemptive communication is so important. What to wear, documents to bring. If you have if you work with, say, kids that, in speech and language pathology in our area, they often need forms from the school district for these visits to be covered. Can children or partners attend? Are there parking issues? I think these are all important. So we're just going to stop sharing slides there. But I think if I can just tell you those things, number one, spend the time to listen to your patient. That's so important. That's the first thing. Number two, ensure that you go into your Jane account and change the language so it sounds like you, because that will help build the trust before that person comes in. And then finally, if you can send any sort of preemptive communication, it contributes to so much trust. And so I'd highly encourage you to do that. So with that, I'm done with my slides, but I would love to answer any questions people have and discuss this because, just talking at you is not truly communication. So let's actually communicate and answer some questions. So with that, Jane team, I will jump over to Q&A if you want to guide it, or I don't know what to do, but.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a question in the chat that I think might be worth answering. So Rachel asked, I'm new to Jane. How are you sending these personal messages to patients outside of setting the communication automated messages?
Yeah. So I'm huge about text message communication because I see that it's it works for us. So we actually have a software called Trust Driven Care that does this, right? But I think adding that in should come secondary to making sure your Jane communication is set up and working. Change the language, make sure it works on the timing you want. And then I think I love two-way text messaging. I just find that that's how everybody communicates, and really has, I find it's the most effective way to communicate or ensure communication occurs.
Thanks. Okay, there's a couple questions in the Q&A as well, so I'll read those out for you. So there's an anonymous question. How do you discuss prognosis and how many treatment sessions we expect for the problem, if you do, especially when it seems cost is a bigger concern these days?
Yeah, great question. And I love the fact that this person is looking long-term. This is a long-term question. So when we talk about that patch framework, patient goals and autonomy, let me just break those two out. One of the things that I found really gets me a lot of traction is asking. So Destin, can I use you as an example again? So Destin, as you might know, with your type of low back pain, there's some things I'm going to do for you, certainly treat you here. And then I'm sure, assume there's things that you need to do for yourself at home, right? All right. So based on that, I want to just establish, how often are you willing to come in the office?
Maybe once a week.
Okay, fantastic. No matter what the answer is, I'll say, now, Destin, I just want to make sure that we're talking honestly here between childcare, work, social activities, all that stuff. You think you can still come in once a week?
No, that's probably too much. Maybe probably once a month, actually.
Once a month. Okay. So I want to double check with her to see, like, is she actually committed? What I'm trying to do is promote her autonomy, because later if I say, now, Destin, you agreed to come in once a month, and that in between those times you would do 20 minutes of exercise 3 times a week. Do I have that right?
Sure.
Okay. And you're still willing to do that?
Yes.
Okay. She just bought into the care plan, right? Because I allowed her to dictate terms, not me. Instead of, Destin, for this care, you're going to need to come in 3 times a week, and you're going to need to do 10 minutes of stretching every day. She may not be as receptive to that. And oftentimes I found that those people stop care and leave. And it's really tough to get people better if they're not coming in your office. Yeah.
I think this next question kind of ties in a bit to what we were just talking about, but Jonah asked, I'd like to hear how you like to communicate and schedule plans of care.
Yeah. So again, I get that buy-in from the patient early. And if I feel like once a month, for example, with Destin is not enough, I'll just discuss that and say, like, I just don't feel like that's enough to get you better effectively. Perhaps you can find someone closer to your house or something so you could come in more often. Take it off their shoulders and they'll be like, no, I'm serious about this. I can do it. Right. So I typically do that. And then I lay out a plan where I'm clear about what I'm willing to do and what they're due. What was the question? Because it disappeared from my.
Oh, sure. It said, I'd like to hear how you like to communicate and schedule plans of care.
Yeah. So right after the initial visit, I send out just that simple, how are you doing text? Destin, it was a pleasure to meet you. Give Scruffy a little scratch for me. And then 24 hours after the visit, and this is all based on research, 24 hours is about where most of the information has been forgotten, and we can pick it back up. I say, Destin, here's what we discussed at your first visit. Here's how many times a week you committed to coming in. Here's what you said you could do, and here's what I'm going to do for you. We never discuss diagnosis or anything like that in there, because this is not a secure platform. But HIPAA is pretty clear that you can discuss things non-PMI, non-protected medical information. So like appointment times and things like that. Like, you want to get back to pickleball, that's not a medical statement. So we discuss that, and then I just send it back to them. Whatever we agreed on, I'm going to send it back to you. So we're in communication.
Great. So we have 2 more questions and we're kind of close to time. So I'm
Okay.
going to say anyone that needs to jump off, they can. But before we do that, I just wanted to say, Josh, if there's any information you want to share, any websites or ways people can get in contact with you, let us know now.
Fantastic.
And that would be really great. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So you can find me at trustdrivencare.com. And that's our communication platform. We're trying to build a platform where people can communicate clearly with their patients and improve that, especially that first visit trust level. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then you had mentioned, thank you, throughout the session, the Jane community group. And so someone from the community team, if you want to pop in a link to that as well. So we have a really active, there's 12,000 members in our
It's
Facebook
awesome.
community now, practitioners across all sorts of specialties and disciplines, helping each other. It's really lovely. We have a specific one for US billing now as well, that
Cool.
we can post in there as well. That's just really focused on that area as well, which is fantastic. And then shout out for our Instagram account, because we're so close to 10,000 followers. So if you want some Jane content on your Instagram, please do follow us there as well. So anyone that needs to jump off, please feel free. But we have 2 more questions, so I thought we could get to those for anyone that wants to stick around, and then we will wrap up. So we've got 2 more questions in the Q&A. So this one is from Joel. He says, how do you vet for your ideal receptionist to complement your communication and care?
Yeah. Joel, the best thing I could say, if you're looking for somebody and if you've been in practice for a while, send a message, either text message or email, out to your database of patients and say, we're looking for somebody to help out at the front desk. The reason for that is they know who you are, Joel. They know the way you talk and the way you practice and the way your core values and everything that exudes out of you. And the right person will say, I would absolutely work in your office, and they will have your values. I find that getting someone out of your patient base, especially if you help them go from not feeling great to really feeling great, they'll be your biggest advocate at the front desk as well. So I think that's the best place to go.
Yeah, I love that. We use internal referrals as well. It's so helpful to find the right people.
It is.
That's so great. I love that. All right, and our last one from Judith. Oh, maybe Adele looks like she's typing an answer, so that might be more of a Jane question. I'm going to read it out anyway. Maybe you have some
Okay.
thoughts on this. So 9 out of 10 patients don't read the info I put on the welcome first appointment email. What's the best way to improve this? Clinic is hard to find, and I give instructions in the email. Oops, just disappeared. Let me go there. I give
Let
instructions
me
in
just
the email.
address the first part of
Yeah,
it.
for sure.
I think one of the reasons it's not read is because it looks like a standard business transactional email. And instead, Jane gives you the opportunity to totally change that and go, you can say, like, you can start it off with Hogwarts, exclamation point, right? And people are going to, what the hell's this? And now they'll at least read it. But if it looks like every other standard message you get that just, you know what I mean? Like, I think they start shutting down. So make sure that language sounds like you and is you. And then the second part of that question, I think,
It
was
says the clinic is hard to find, and I give instructions in the email, but no one reads it and then struggles to find it the first time.
right. Maybe lead with what is difficult, right? So instead of opening with, thank you so much for coming to our clinic. We're really excited to take care of you as a patient. We value you, blah, blah. That's the standard language. I would flip it over and go, the opening line would be, don't park on east side, exclamation point. You might get towed. Hey, I'm Dr. Josh. I'm really excited about you coming in, but it's so important to me that your car doesn't get towed. So please don't park on the east side of our building. Park on the west side, and then give some marker of it, like some visual marker. It's the one with the big oak tree, or it's the one with the statue of lions, or whatever you have that you can identify with. I think just flipping over that communication and not having that early fluff encourages people to read.
Amazing. That's great. Amazing. Well, I think we're at time. It's fantastic. I think this was such a great session. We've seen some really great comments in the chat. Thank you everyone for sticking around for a few extra minutes. This is fantastic. We will be sharing out the recording for everyone to watch again. I know there were some comments about wanting to share it with your team members, which is so great to see. That's so lovely. So thank you so much. We'll include a link to Josh's website as well in the follow-up communication. And if you have any additional questions, like I said, pop into our Facebook community. That's a really great place to chat with other people and get some ideas from your fellow practitioners and clinic owners. So thank you so much. Thank you again, Josh. It's always such a pleasure to have you here to chat with our community. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Thank you.